This video will focus mostly on how to read a map. Now, the map we're looking at right now to start us off with is actually just a normal map like the ones you would see in everyday life. However, the ones that we focus on in geology will tend to look a little bit different. All maps that we are worried about will contain sorts of the same information. Even the ones that you're used to seeing already should contain some of these aspects. So no matter what map you're looking at, the very first thing you should do is try to find that title. The title will typically include quite a few pieces of information. On this map here that we have, the title is in the upper right-hand corner. I can go ahead and zoom in on that title. And you can see that it says it's the Southwest Columbia Quadrangle. Quadrangle is really just another word for rectangle. The United States Geological Survey ends up making all of these maps, and in order to do this well, they divide the planet into a lot of different rectangles. You will see below that it says South Carolina. That's because that's the location that we are in. And then 7.5-minute series. As you should know, the planet is divided into degrees of latitude and longitude. Each of those individual degrees is equal to what we call 60 minutes. Each of those minutes then can be divided further into seconds. So this 7.5-minute series is saying that we are in a small fraction of a whole degree. So we are quite zoomed in. Even if you look at this map, though, we are quite far out. Now, because this is a normal map, there's nothing else describing what we would see other than the region. So the three things you would want to find on the actual title are going to be the type of map. So normally it would say something else, but because this is a normal map, we don't get that piece of information. The size, that would be the 7.5-minute series, and the region. In this case, we get both the Southwest Columbia Quadrangle and then a little more generally, South Carolina. So no matter what map you are looking at, that should be the very first thing you look for. The second thing you should look for is a scale. Now, this is only going to be useful if we are expected to measure something. So you might see a map later on of like the United States. Typically, those are less likely to have scales just because we are not measuring individual distances there. Scales tend to be located at the bottom of the map. So in this case, it's down here. I will zoom in on that. And you can see that there's a few different aspects. There's these bars. That's going to normally show the comparison between kilometers and meters when you're actually measuring, because that distance you can throw around on the map. That way you can find out the actual distances between two locations that way. You will also see this little scale 1 to 24,000. That is if you are going to measure 1 inch on here or 1 centimeter, that would be equivalent to 24,000 times that amount in real world. So again, that scale is going to be useful. However, that will only be apparent if and when the map has things you are expected to measure. You might also see it mentions a contour interval a little bit lower. We aren't worried about that right now. However, in about 10 weeks of lab, when we start looking at contour maps, that's going to be very, very relevant to us. That's more so measuring an up and down movement as opposed to side to side. Our third and final thing that we are going to be worried about is going to take place only if we are actually going to be showing information. Typically, this is going to be a key or a legend. In our case on here, our key or legend is going to be located in the lower right-hand corner. And on this map, all that we are worried about is road classifications. So it has different colorations based on which thing we are looking at. All of our maps that we are looking at should have some of those types of things. So it should have a title. That title should tell us the type, size, and region of the map. It should have a scale if we are expected to measure something. That's telling us the size or dimensions of things. And it should have a key or a legend. That should tell us what we're measuring, or in some instances, the way we are measuring or grouping things, what the criteria is, or how we're grouping them. Typically, that will also include units if it's not a category. In this case, since we're classifying these different roads, we are categorizing them. We don't need a typical unit for that. Then the other things are things that maps might have. That doesn't mean that without these you can't figure something out, but it does mean it might be a little bit more difficult. One of the biggest things that people tend to struggle with on maps is orientation. So which direction is which? Now, on most maps, it will include some kind of compass rose. That normally tends to be located in the lower right and very apparent if it's going to be there. On USGS maps, they instead use a slightly different one, and it's located at the bottom, just to the left of the scale. If we zoom in on that feature, you can see right over here that we basically have a little arrow pointing up. That is going to be our grid north, and then we have a slightly off-center one, and that's going to be our magnetic north. Really, it doesn't matter which one we're going to base it off of right now. If you get into advanced GIS or cartography stuff, you're going to have to worry more about the difference between those two. But in general, on any map, a compass rose really just tells you that north is pointing up. If it doesn't tell you which way north is, or if there is no compass rose, typically speaking, it is safe to assume that whichever way up is on your diagram, that would be north. So in this case, if I didn't have that information, I know my title and stuff is at the top of the page, I would assume that north would be pointing this direction. So that should be something you are capable of doing on any map like this. Some maps are going to have additional information throughout the sides. So it might contain things like cross sections. This right now is a top-down view of a map. What if we're looking at a side view of an area? That's a cross section. It might include fieldwork images if you're looking at geology. That's going to show the sorts of things we've done there. It might include sketches. It might include pictures. It could also include additional information. This is going to really vary depending on the map that we're looking at. So all of those different things are going to be things we are going to look for on maps. So we have started with this map right here. Let's move to our next maps. Our second map, let's start by looking for a title. Now, I don't actually see a true title on this, but in the upper left, I do see that current temperatures in degree Fahrenheit is listed. That is going to count as our title. There's also going to be a little bit of other information here. We see that it says January 16th, 2026. That means that this is going to be providing information about the current temperatures on January 16th, 2026. And looking at the map, it looks like it's the United States, specifically speaking, the 48 continental ones. As you see, we don't have Alaska or Hawaii shown, so it is limiting our area a little bit, but those are the sorts of things you should be able to get off of the title. So we know the type of map we're looking at, temperature. Our size or region is going to be based upon the entire United States. We also know when this map happened. Next, we would look for a scale. To me, this does not look like something we would be wanting to figure out the individual measurements of. So we are not trying to measure the distance between things. We do not need a scale on this. Our third thing is going to be the key or legend. In this case, what we're measuring, well, we already know from our title that we are looking at temperatures. How we're classifying it, though, is based on this bar on the top. We're color coding things based on the actual temperatures. So that's how we are doing this. And our units, as we said earlier, is degrees Fahrenheit. Orientation, once again, I do not see a compass rose. That means that I have to make an assumption about the direction. In this case, I do know already that north should be on the Minnesota side rather than the Texas side. So that means that north is going to be pointing up towards our title, just like before. I don't have any cross sections or field work, and I don't have any additional information other than, once again, that little bit of a date there. So that's really how we're reading these maps. Even though this is a very different type of map, we're looking at entirely different things, we're still getting the same types of information. Our final map we will look at. This is what a professional USGS map might look like. There is a lot of things going on right now. So it's important for us to go step by step and try to identify where these different things are. So once again, we will start with our title. I'm looking for some keywords. They tend to be bolded out much more in a larger font size. I see those in this upper left-hand corner. This title here says Geologic Map of the Grand Canyon. Hey, that's going to tell me a lot about the type of map. It's also telling me the region of the map. Then I'll keep reading. 30-minute by 60-minute quadrangle. And then it lists out the counties and the other location aspects. So that means I know the type of map. It's going to be a geologic map. I know the size. It's providing me that 30-minute by 60-minute quadrangle. And then it's also telling me the region. In this case, Grand Canyon is good enough for me. So all of those pieces of information, I should already be able to kind of make an assumption about the types of information present in this map. So it's a geologic map. I would anticipate this is going to be talking about the rock features. It could include other aspects as well, but that would be a pretty safe bet for a geologic map to talk about rocks. Next up, we are going to try to find our scale, just like all of our other maps. Now, USGS, remember, they tend to put a scale right at the bottom of their maps. So I'm going to zoom in, and it looks like we do have a scale bar down here. Now, this is quite a fine printed scale bar, so it's really hard to read what it says. But I do know the location of it on this map. That's really the key part right now. Where are things located? And we know that this means I could measure the distance between 2 points on here. I know how to use that scale, so if I had this in a larger print, I would likely be more successful. And then the key or legend. We want to know what it's measuring and how it's grouped. If there are units, we would want to know those as well. I see a lot of colors on that map, so I'm assuming I'm going to be looking for something with a lot of colors close together. In this case, it's in the upper right-hand section. So zooming in on that, I can kind of briefly read through some of these. It's hard to see, but it reads to me as though these are talking about rock layers and ages. So it looks to be that the oldest things are down here on the lower right, and the youngest things are here on the upper left. So it's telling me not only the types of rock, but the order they formed in, and that's how it's grouped. There do not appear to be true units on this, but it does include things like which era that formed in. So that would be the 3 things we're always looking for, and then we have other stuff we're hoping for. So once again, we're going to have to figure out the orientation. Just like all of the USGS maps, it's going to have a little compass rose down here, but once again, we're pretty safe to assume that north is pointing upwards. We're also going to actually have cross sections on this. So that's what we see in this section here. These are different areas on the map that we get a side view of. So you will actually be able to create these sorts of things later on this semester. It is really, really difficult for most individuals to think not only of a top-down view, but a side view and see how they relate. So this is a skill we are going to work on building throughout the semester. Fieldwork, well, there's fieldwork all surrounding it. All of these pictures of the different areas, those are all individual aspects of fieldwork. So fieldwork is actually taking up most of this entire map. Not the part just that we're actually looking at here, but all of this additional stuff that we might care about. And then additional information, well, there's little blurbs under each of these to explain what they are. Inside of our key, we have a little bit of extra stuff as well for some typical geologic symbols. So really our goal with all of this is trying to know where to look for certain pieces of information. You will not need to go this in depth right now, but over time you'll slowly get more and more used to using these specific skills.